The credit card statement that would shatter a marriage before it had truly begun arrived in Arjun Mehta's email inbox at 6:23 a.m. on November 16, 2023. Just 18 hours after he and Priya Nair had completed their traditional Hindu wedding ceremony in Kerala, India, revealing unauthorized charges totaling 47,000 euros that his new bride had secretly accumulated in the months leading up to their arranged marriage, transforming what should have been the happiest morning of their new life together into the beginning of a crisis that would expose fundamental incompatibilities and dangerous patterns of control that threatened not only their relationship but Priya's physical and emotional safety. The shock of discovering Priya's hidden spending while she slept peacefully beside him in their honeymoon suite at the luxury resort in Mannar created an immediate psychological crisis for Arjun, whose carefully planned vision of marriage included complete financial transparency and shared decision-making about all expenditures, particularly given his role as the primary breadwinner, who had invested significant resources in their wedding celebrations and their planned relocation to his home in Austin, Texas, where he worked as a senior IT project manager for a multinational technology company. The detailed examination of the credit card charges revealed a pattern of expensive purchases that included designer jewelry worth 12,000 euros, luxury clothing and accessories totaling 15,000 euros, and beauty treatments and spa services costing 8,000 euros, all acquired during the 6 months when Priya had been preparing for their marriage while living with her parents in Kerala, and ostensibly saving money for their future household expenses and establishment of their American life together. The most disturbing aspect of Priya's secret spending was not merely the financial impact, but the systematic deception it represented, including her use of credit cards that had been obtained using false income information and her parents' co-signatures, along with her deliberate concealment of these purchases from both families during the engagement period, when financial discussions and planning had been central to their marriage negotiations and cultural expectations about economic responsibility and compatibility. The confrontation that followed Arjun's discovery of the credit card statement began with his attempt to wake Priya calmly and discuss the charges rationally, though his growing anger and sense of betrayal quickly transformed the conversation into an interrogation that revealed not only the extent of her financial deception, but also fundamental differences in their values and expectations about money, autonomy, and the balance of power within their marriage relationship. Priya's initial response to the confrontation was confusion and defensive justification, as she attempted to explain that the purchases had been necessary for her appearance and preparation as his wife, reflecting her understanding that his professional status and social position required her to maintain certain standards of dress and presentation that would reflect positively on his reputation within the Indian American community in Austin, where they would be establishing their married life. The escalation of their argument revealed deeper cultural and generational conflicts about women's autonomy and financial independence within traditional marriage frameworks, with Priya expressing her belief that the engagement period had provided her with legitimate opportunity to prepare for married life according to her own understanding of appropriate standards, while Arjun viewed her spending as a fundamental violation of trust and evidence of character flaws that threatened their future financial security and stability. The psychological dynamics that emerged during this confrontation demonstrated dangerous patterns of control and intimidation that had been concealed during their courtship period, including Arjun's attempts to use financial leverage and cultural expectations about wifely obedience to establish dominance over Priya's decision-making and personal autonomy, creating immediate concerns about the safety and sustainability of their relationship moving forward. The involvement of both families in addressing the crisis began with angry phone calls and accusations that quickly revealed previously hidden tensions and disagreements about the marriage arrangement, including questions about financial responsibility, cultural expectations, and the appropriate balance between traditional values and contemporary relationship dynamics within the context of their Indian American immigrant experience and professional aspirations. The immediate practical consequences of the discovery included cancellation of planned honeymoon activities, heated negotiations about financial responsibility for the unauthorized charges, and growing recognition that their marriage might not survive its first week due to fundamental incompatibilities that had been concealed or ignored during the arrangement and engagement process, when both families had focused primarily on matching education, career prospects, and cultural compatibility. The resort staff's awareness of the couple's marital crisis created additional stress and embarrassment that complicated their attempts to resolve the situation privately, while also providing potential witnesses to concerning behavior patterns that would later prove crucial in understanding the escalation of conflict and the emergence of abusive dynamics that threatened Priya's safety and well-being during what should have been their romantic honeymoon period. The documentation that both Priya and Arjun began maintaining about their conflict reflected their growing recognition that their marriage might end in separation or divorce, requiring legal evidence and financial records that would protect their individual interests, while also addressing family expectations and cultural pressures to preserve their relationship, despite evidence of serious incompatibility and potential safety concerns that required immediate intervention and professional support. The morning after their explosive financial confrontation, Priya Nair attempted to explain her secret spending to her new husband Arjun Mehta through tearful apologies and detailed justifications about the cultural pressures she had faced to appear worthy of marriage to such a successful and accomplished man, though her explanations only intensified his anger about what he viewed as systematic deception and financial irresponsibility that violated the fundamental trust required for successful marriage and family life together. The detailed breakdown of Priya's unauthorized purchases revealed the psychological pressure she had experienced during their engagement period, including her desperate attempts to transform herself into the perfect wife for a man whose professional success and social status required a spouse who could represent his achievements appropriately within the affluent Indian American community in Austin, where appearance and material success were closely linked to social acceptance and professional advancement. Arjun's response to Priya's explanations demonstrated concerning patterns of psychological control and emotional manipulation that had been concealed during their courtship, including his insistence that her spending reflected character defects and moral failures, rather than understandable anxiety about meeting his family's expectations and his own implied standards for appropriate wifely appearance and behavior within their social and professional circles. The involvement of resort security became necessary when their argument escalated to shouting and accusations that disturbed neighboring guests, creating the first documented evidence of their marital crisis, while also establishing a record of concerning behavior that would later prove relevant to understanding the progression of abuse and control that characterized their brief and troubled relationship. The phone calls to family members that both Priya and Arjun made during their crisis revealed deeper family dynamics and cultural conflicts that had contributed to their problems, including pressure from both sides to maintain the marriage, despite obvious incompatibilities, and the emergence of dangerous control patterns that threatened Priya's safety and autonomy within the relationship framework that had been established through their arranged marriage process. Priya's conversation with her mother, Deepa Nair, revealed the family's desperation to secure her marriage to such an accomplished and financially stable man, creating pressure for her to accept blame for the crisis and work toward reconciliation, despite growing evidence that Arjun's controlling behavior and financial obsessions posed serious risks to her emotional and potentially physical well-being within their marriage relationship. The cultural mediation, attempted by elder family members through long-distance phone calls, demonstrated the complex intersection of traditional values and contemporary relationship challenges. As relatives struggled to provide guidance about financial responsibility and marital expectations, while lacking complete understanding of the psychological dynamics and safety concerns that were emerging in the immediate aftermath of their wedding ceremony. Arjun's consultation with his colleague Ravi Patel provided additional insight into his character and relationship expectations, revealing patterns of rigid control and perfectionist demands that had been evident in his professional relationships, but had been concealed or minimized during the marriage arrangement process, when both families had focused on his career, success, and financial stability, rather than his interpersonal skills and emotional maturity. The resort management's documentation of the couple's crisis included incident reports and witness statements that would later prove crucial in legal proceedings, while also demonstrating the hotel industry's growing awareness of domestic violence and the importance of recognizing and responding to signs of abusive relationship dynamics, even during what were supposed to be celebratory occasions and romantic getaways. The immediate financial consequences of their crisis included disputes about responsibility for the honeymoon expenses, negotiations about the unauthorized credit card charges, and growing recognition that their planned relocation to Austin might need to be postponed or canceled if their marriage could not survive the immediate aftermath of these revelations about trust, financial compatibility, and fundamental differences in values and expectations. The psychological evaluation that Priya sought through the resort's concierge services provided her with professional perspective on the concerning patterns of control and manipulation that were emerging in her relationship, including validation of her growing concerns about her safety and autonomy within a marriage framework that seemed designed to limit her independence and decision-making authority. The legal consultation that both parties began pursuing through long-distance communication with attorneys in both India and the United States reflected their growing recognition that their marriage might not be salvageable, requiring professional guidance about divorce procedures, financial responsibilities, and the complex legal issues surrounding international marriages and immigration status that would affect their future options and obligations. The escalation of conflict between Priya and Arjun during their third day in Kerala reached dangerous levels when his attempts to control her communication with family and friends revealed systematic patterns of isolation and psychological manipulation that transformed their honeymoon crisis into a potential domestic violence situation, requiring immediate intervention and safety planning to protect Priya from escalating abuse and control that threatened her physical and emotional well-being. The documentation that Priya began secretly maintaining about Arjun's controlling behavior included recordings of their arguments, photographs of her emotional distress, and detailed written accounts of his threats and intimidation tactics, creating evidence that would later prove crucial in legal proceedings, while also providing her with validation of her growing recognition that their marriage had become psychologically dangerous and potentially life-threatening. Arjun's attempts to isolate Priya from her family support system included confiscating her phone, monitoring her communications, and threatening to cancel their planned relocation to America if she continued to complain to relatives about their financial disagreements, demonstrating classic patterns of abusive control that were designed to increase her dependency and reduce her ability to seek help or escape from dangerous relationship dynamics. The intervention attempted by Priya's family became necessary when her distressed phone calls and limited communication raised concerns about her safety and well-being, leading to direct confrontation with Arjun about his treatment of their daughter and growing recognition that the marriage arrangement had placed her in a dangerous situation that required immediate family protection and possible termination of the relationship. The cultural complications surrounding their crisis reflected broader tensions between traditional arranged marriage practices and contemporary understanding of domestic violence and psychological abuse, as family members struggled to balance cultural expectations about marriage preservation with growing awareness that Priya's safety required immediate intervention and possibly separation from her new husband. The resort staff's growing concern about the couple's situation led to discreet inquiries and offers of assistance that provided Priya with resources and support options that she had not previously considered, including information about domestic violence services and legal protections available to women in abusive relationships, even within the context of traditional cultural marriage arrangements and family expectations. The psychological assessment that Priya received through emergency counseling services revealed the extent of trauma and emotional damage that had occurred during just a few days of marriage, including symptoms of anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress that indicated serious psychological abuse and the need for immediate safety planning and long-term therapeutic intervention to address the impact of her experience. The legal consultation that Priya's family arranged through their attorney in Kerala provided crucial information about her rights and options within Indian marriage law, including procedures for separation and divorce that could protect her from continued abuse while addressing the complex financial and social consequences of ending a marriage so soon after the wedding ceremony and cultural celebrations. The evidence gathering that began during this period included documentation of the financial disputes, records of Arjun's controlling behavior, witness statements from resort staff and family members, and medical documentation of Priya's psychological distress, creating a comprehensive legal record that would support her claims of abuse while also protecting her from potential retaliation or further harm. The safety planning that was implemented by domestic violence advocates included secure communication methods, emergency contact procedures, and contingency plans for immediate escape if Arjun's behavior escalated to physical violence, recognizing that psychological abuse often preceded physical assault and that her situation required professional intervention to prevent further escalation and potential serious harm. The family crisis meeting that was convened to address the situation revealed deep disagreements about appropriate responses to domestic abuse within traditional marriage frameworks, with some relatives supporting immediate separation, while others advocated for counseling and reconciliation efforts that might preserve the marriage, despite evidence of serious safety concerns and abusive relationship dynamics. The community response to news of their marital crisis reflected broader cultural conflicts about women's rights within marriage, the balance between traditional values and contemporary safety concerns, and the appropriate role of extended family in addressing domestic violence situations that occurred within arranged marriage contexts, where community reputation and social standing were important considerations affecting family decisions. The turning point in Priya's situation came when Arjun's physical aggression during an argument about her refusal to apologize for her spending created the first incident of domestic violence that required medical attention, police intervention, transforming their private marital crisis into a criminal matter that would expose the full extent of his abusive behavior while providing Priya with legal protections and community support for escaping their dangerous relationship. The medical documentation of Priya's injuries from the physical assault included photographs and clinical records that provided crucial evidence of domestic violence, while also connecting her with victim advocacy services and legal resources that specialized in protecting women from abusive spouses, particularly within cultural communities where traditional expectations might discourage reporting or seeking help for intimate partner violence. The police investigation that began with Priya's assault report revealed additional evidence of Arjun's controlling behavior and psychological abuse, including witness statements from resort staff who had observed concerning interactions and documentation of his attempts to isolate her from family support systems, creating a comprehensive criminal case that extended beyond the immediate physical violence to encompass systematic patterns of abuse and control. The restraining order that was issued to protect Priya from further contact with Arjun provided immediate legal protection, while also establishing official recognition of the domestic violence situation and creating legal consequences for any attempts he might make to continue his abuse or intimidation through direct contact or third-party harassment and stalking behaviors. The family's response to the domestic violence incident was complicated by cultural shame and community pressure to preserve the marriage despite obvious safety concerns, though Priya's injuries and the criminal charges against Arjun eventually convinced even reluctant relatives that separation was necessary to protect her from serious harm or potential death at the hands of her abusive husband. Detective Laura Mitchell's investigation into the domestic violence case revealed patterns of controlling behavior that had been present throughout Arjun's previous relationships, including testimony from former girlfriends and colleagues who described similar incidents of financial control, emotional manipulation, and intimidation tactics that demonstrated his systematic approach to dominating intimate partners through psychological and economic abuse. The criminal charges filed against Arjun included domestic violence, assault, criminal threats, and violation of restraining order provisions, creating serious legal consequences that would affect his immigration status, professional reputation, and future ability to obtain employment in positions requiring background checks and security clearances within the technology industry where his career had been previously successful. The victim impact statement that Priya prepared for the criminal proceedings documented the comprehensive damage caused by Arjun's abuse, including physical injuries, psychological trauma, financial losses, and the destruction of her dreams about marriage and family life, providing the court with detailed understanding of how domestic violence affected not only immediate safety, but also long-term well-being and life prospects. The international legal complications arising from their marriage and subsequent domestic violence created complex issues regarding immigration status, divorce proceedings, and criminal prosecution across multiple jurisdictions, requiring coordination between Indian and American legal systems while ensuring that Priya received adequate protection regardless of geographic location or citizenship status. The community education initiatives that emerged from Priya's case included awareness programs about domestic violence within arranged marriage contexts, resources for identifying and responding to early warning signs of abusive relationships, and support services for families dealing with the cultural conflicts that arose when traditional marriage practices intersected with contemporary understanding of intimate partner violence and victim safety. The therapeutic support that Priya received through specialized domestic violence services addressed both the immediate trauma from her abuse and the longer-term process of rebuilding her sense of autonomy and self-worth after experiencing systematic control and manipulation that had undermined her confidence and decision-making capabilities within intimate relationships and family contexts. The legal advocacy that was provided to protect Priya's interests included assistance with divorce proceedings, immigration status protection, financial recovery efforts, and ongoing safety planning that addressed the possibility of continued harassment or retaliation by Arjun, despite criminal charges and legal restrictions designed to prevent further contact or abuse. The divorce proceedings that began 6 weeks after Priya's assault created additional complications, as Arjun attempted to use their brief marriage and her pre-wedding spending as leverage to avoid financial responsibility for the domestic violence, and to minimize the criminal charges he faced, demonstrating continued patterns of manipulation and control even within the legal system that was supposed to protect victims from further abuse and exploitation by their perpetrators. The financial investigation conducted as part of the divorce revealed that Arjun had been systematically monitoring and controlling Priya's expenses even before their marriage, including background checks on her financial history and credit reports that had been obtained without her knowledge or consent, providing additional evidence of his obsessive need to control and dominate intimate partners through economic surveillance and manipulation. The testimony provided by Ravi Patel, Arjun's colleague and friend, proved crucial in establishing patterns of abusive behavior that extended beyond intimate relationships to include workplace bullying and professional intimidation tactics that had been reported by subordinates and team members who had experienced his controlling management style and explosive reactions to perceived challenges to his authority. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court as part of the criminal proceedings revealed that Arjun exhibited traits consistent with narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial tendencies that explained his inability to accept responsibility for his abusive behavior, while also indicating high risk for continued violence and escalating abuse if he were able to access future intimate partners or maintain contact with Priya. The victim safety planning that continued throughout the legal proceedings included relocation assistance for Priya, enhanced security measures for her family home, and ongoing monitoring of Arjun's compliance with restraining order requirements, recognizing that domestic violence often escalated during separation and divorce processes when abusive partners faced loss of control over their victims. The immigration consequences that Arjun faced due to his domestic violence conviction included potential deportation and permanent bars to re-entering the United States, creating additional motivation for him to contest the charges and attempt to manipulate the legal system through false claims about Priya's behavior and character, though these efforts were undermined by extensive documentation and witness testimony. The community response to the criminal trial included support for Priya from domestic violence advocates and women's rights organizations, while also revealing cultural divisions within their Indian American community about appropriate responses to intimate partner violence and the balance between traditional family values and contemporary understanding of victim safety and legal protections. The sentencing phase of Arjun's criminal case included victim impact statements from Priya and her family that documented the comprehensive damage caused by his abuse, while also providing the court with recommendations for appropriate punishment and rehabilitation requirements that would address his dangerous behavior patterns and protect future potential victims from similar abuse. The civil litigation that Priya pursued parallel to the criminal case sought compensation for her medical expenses, psychological treatment costs, and the financial damage caused by having to abandon her planned relocation and career development opportunities, creating additional legal consequences for Arjun's abusive behavior, while providing her with resources for recovery and rebuilding her life. The professional consequences that Arjun faced included termination from his position in the technology industry and difficulties obtaining future employment due to background check requirements and the public nature of his domestic violence conviction, demonstrating that intimate partner abuse had comprehensive life consequences that extended far beyond immediate legal punishment. The ongoing safety monitoring that was required throughout the legal proceedings included regular check-ins with victim services, updates about Arjun's location and activities, and contingency planning for potential violations of court orders or attempts at retaliation that might endanger Priya or her family members, who had supported her decision to leave the abusive relationship and seek legal protection. The international coordination that was necessary for enforcing legal protections and court orders required cooperation between American and Indian law enforcement agencies, creating precedents for addressing domestic violence cases that crossed international boundaries and involved immigration status complications that could affect victim safety and perpetrator accountability. The appellate process that Arjun initiated to challenge his domestic violence conviction created additional stress and legal expenses for Priya, while also extending the timeline for achieving final resolution of their case, though the appellate court's eventual affirmation of his conviction and sentence provided important legal precedent for prosecuting domestic violence within arranged marriage contexts and cultural communities where traditional values might complicate victim protection efforts. The victim advocacy work that emerged from Priya's case included development of specialized resources for women experiencing domestic violence within arranged marriages, recognition training for identifying early warning signs of abusive control patterns during engagement periods, and culturally competent support services that address the unique challenges faced by victims whose abuse occurred within traditional family and community frameworks. The research initiatives that were funded to study Priya's case contributed to enhanced understanding of how financial control and economic abuse functioned within intimate partner violence, particularly regarding the ways that perpetrators used money and spending to establish dominance and create dependency that made it difficult for victims to leave abusive relationships or maintain independence after separation. The policy changes that resulted from advocacy efforts inspired by Priya's experience included enhanced training for law enforcement officers, responding to domestic violence calls involving cultural and immigration complications, improved coordination between criminal and immigration courts to protect victim safety, and better resources for supporting survivors through complex legal proceedings that involved multiple jurisdictions and legal systems. The community healing initiatives that were developed in response to the case addressed cultural conflicts between traditional marriage practices and contemporary understanding of intimate partner violence, providing education and dialogue opportunities for community members to discuss appropriate responses to domestic abuse while maintaining respect for cultural values and family structures. The ongoing monitoring of Arjun's compliance with legal restrictions revealed multiple violations of restraining orders and court-mandated counseling requirements, leading to additional criminal charges and extended periods of incarceration that demonstrated his continued dangerousness and inability to accept responsibility for his abusive behavior or modify his controlling patterns toward intimate partners. The international cooperation that had been developed for managing the legal aspects of Priya's case continued to facilitate information sharing and enforcement coordination that protected her safety, even when Arjun attempted to use his connections in India to circumvent American legal restrictions or continue harassment through third-party intermediaries and family pressure tactics. The therapeutic innovations that emerged from treating Priya's recovery included specialized approaches to addressing trauma that occurred within cultural contexts, where shame and family honor complicated traditional domestic violence, counseling methods providing culturally competent therapeutic interventions that respected traditional values while addressing the psychological damage caused by intimate partner abuse. The educational programs that were developed for young women in arranged marriage situations included information about recognizing financial abuse and economic control, understanding legal rights and protections available to domestic violence victims, and accessing support services that could provide assistance while respecting cultural sensitivities and family relationships. The professional development initiatives that were created for attorneys, judges, and court personnel included training about cultural factors in domestic violence cases, understanding the intersection of immigration status and victim safety, and developing appropriate legal strategies for protecting victims whose abuse occurred within complex cultural and international contexts. The victim compensation programs that were enhanced in response to Priya's case provided better financial support for medical treatment, counseling services, and economic recovery assistance that addressed the comprehensive costs associated with escaping intimate partner violence and rebuilding independent lives after experiencing systematic abuse and control. The prevention strategies that were developed based on analysis of Priya's experience included early intervention programs for couples showing signs of financial conflict or controlling behavior, community education about healthy relationship dynamics within cultural marriage practices, and enhanced screening procedures for identifying potential domestic violence risks during marriage arrangement processes. The long-term recovery process that Priya undertook following her escape from the abusive marriage required extensive psychological counseling to address post-traumatic stress disorder and the complex cultural trauma associated with the failure of her arranged marriage, while also rebuilding her sense of personal autonomy and decision-making capability that had been systematically undermined through months of financial control and emotional manipulation by her former husband. The family reconciliation that occurred during Priya's recovery involved difficult conversations about cultural expectations and family responsibility for protecting daughters from abusive relationships, leading to enhanced awareness within their extended family network about recognizing early warning signs of domestic violence and supporting victims who needed to leave dangerous marriages despite cultural pressure to preserve relationships. The community advocacy work that Priya eventually undertaken included public speaking about her experience with domestic violence in arranged marriages, providing testimony for legislative initiatives designed to enhance victim protection, and supporting other women who were experiencing similar abuse within cultural contexts, where traditional values and family expectations might discourage reporting or seeking help. The professional rebuilding that Priya accomplished included completing her interrupted education, developing career skills that provided financial independence, and establishing professional relationships that supported her growth and autonomy, rather than creating dependency or vulnerability to future exploitation by controlling partners or employers who might seek to take advantage of her previous traumatic experience. The legal resolution of remaining civil matters took several years and involved complex negotiations about financial responsibility, immigration status, and ongoing protection measures that ensured Priya's safety, while also addressing the practical consequences of having to rebuild her life after experiencing domestic violence that had destroyed her original plans for marriage, family, and career development in America. The monitoring of Arjun's continued compliance with legal restrictions revealed ongoing patterns of attempted contact and harassment through third-party intermediaries, social media surveillance, and indirect threats that demonstrated his persistent inability to accept the end of their relationship or respect legal boundaries designed to protect Priya from continued abuse and intimidation. The international coordination that remained necessary for enforcing protective orders and preventing harassment required ongoing communication between American and Indian law enforcement agencies, creating permanent frameworks for managing cases involving domestic violence perpetrators who attempted to use international boundaries and cultural networks to circumvent legal restrictions and continue abusing their victims. The victim services that continued to support Priya's recovery included specialized counseling for cultural trauma, legal advocacy for ongoing protection needs, and practical assistance with employment, housing, and financial independence that addressed the comprehensive impact of domestic violence on all aspects of survivors' lives and long-term well-being. The research contributions that emerged from detailed analysis of Priya's case provided valuable insights into the intersection of financial abuse and domestic violence within arranged marriage contexts, informing the development of better screening tools, intervention strategies, and support services for women who might be vulnerable to economic control and psychological manipulation by abusive partners. The policy advocacy that grew from Priya's experience influenced legislation regarding domestic violence protection for immigrant women, enhanced training requirements for professionals working with victims from diverse cultural backgrounds, and improved coordination between criminal justice and immigration systems to ensure that victim safety remained the primary priority, regardless of citizenship or cultural factors. The community education initiatives that were established to honor Priya's experience included comprehensive programs about healthy relationship dynamics within cultural marriage practices, financial literacy and independence for young women, and recognition training for identifying and responding to early signs of abusive control and manipulation within intimate partnerships. The ongoing impact assessment of interventions developed in response to Priya's case revealed measurable improvements in victim identification, safety planning, and support services for women experiencing domestic violence within arranged marriage contexts, demonstrating that her traumatic experience had contributed to meaningful improvements in protection and advocacy for other vulnerable individuals. The 5-year follow-up evaluation of Priya's recovery demonstrated remarkable resilience and personal growth despite the severe trauma she had experienced, including successful completion of graduate education, establishment of a thriving career in social work, specializing in domestic violence, victim advocacy, and development of healthy relationships that respected her autonomy and supported her continued healing and professional development within culturally sensitive frameworks. The impact on policy and practice that resulted from advocacy efforts inspired by Priya's case included enhanced legal protections for domestic violence victims with complicated immigration status, improved training for law enforcement and court personnel dealing with cultural factors in intimate partner violence, and better coordination between criminal justice and social service systems to provide comprehensive support for survivors. The community transformation that occurred within Priya's cultural network included increased awareness about domestic violence warning signs, enhanced support for women experiencing relationship difficulties, and evolving attitudes about the balance between traditional marriage values and contemporary understanding of healthy relationship dynamics that respected individual autonomy and safety. The ongoing monitoring of Arjun's compliance with legal restrictions revealed that he had continued to violate court orders through third-party contact attempts and social media harassment, leading to additional criminal charges and extended periods of incarceration that demonstrated the persistent nature of his abusive tendencies and the importance of maintaining long-term protective measures for his victims. The international cooperation frameworks that had been developed for managing Priya's case continued to facilitate successful prosecution of domestic violence cases involving cross-border elements, providing templates for law enforcement agencies dealing with similar situations, while ensuring that perpetrators could not exploit jurisdictional boundaries to escape accountability or continue harassing victims. The victim advocacy movement that had grown from Priya's experience achieved significant legislative victories, including enhanced funding for culturally competent domestic violence services, improved legal protections for immigrant victims, and better training requirements for professionals working with survivors from diverse cultural backgrounds who faced unique challenges in accessing help and achieving safety. The therapeutic innovations that emerged from treating Priya's recovery contributed to enhanced understanding of cultural trauma and its intersection with intimate partner violence, providing mental health professionals with better tools and techniques for supporting survivors whose abuse occurred within complex cultural and family contexts that required specialized intervention approaches. The educational initiatives that were developed to honor Priya's experience reached thousands of young women through community programs, university curricula, and online resources that provided practical information about recognizing financial abuse, understanding legal rights and protections, and accessing support services while navigating cultural expectations and family relationships. The professional development programs that were established for attorneys, counselors, and victim advocates included comprehensive training about cultural competency in domestic violence cases, understanding the intersection of financial abuse and intimate partner violence, and developing effective strategies for supporting survivors through complex legal and recovery processes that respected their cultural identity and values. The research findings that continued to emerge from analysis of Priya's case influenced academic understanding of domestic violence within arranged marriage contexts, contributing to enhanced knowledge about risk factors, intervention strategies, and recovery processes that inform the development of evidence-based practices for supporting victims and preventing future abuse. The community healing initiatives that had been developed in response to Priya's case continued to provide forums for dialogue about healthy relationships within cultural marriage practices, while also supporting other families and individuals who were dealing with similar conflicts between traditional values and contemporary understanding of intimate partner violence and victim safety. The ongoing impact of Priya's advocacy work extended beyond individual case outcomes to include systematic improvements in domestic violence response systems, enhanced legal protections for vulnerable populations, and increased community awareness about the serious consequences of intimate partner abuse and the importance of supporting survivors through comprehensive recovery and empowerment programs. The 10-year anniversary of Priya's escape from her abusive marriage marked a significant milestone in ongoing efforts to address domestic violence within arranged marriage contexts, with measurable improvements in victim identification, legal protections, and support services that had been directly influenced by lessons learned from her case and the advocacy work that had emerged from her traumatic but ultimately transformative experience. The comprehensive impact assessment conducted to evaluate the long-term outcomes of interventions developed in response to Priya's case revealed substantial improvements in law enforcement response to domestic violence calls involving cultural and immigration complications, enhanced coordination between criminal and civil legal systems, and better resources for supporting survivors through complex recovery processes that addressed both immediate safety and long-term empowerment needs. The victim advocacy organization that Priya had established to honor her experience continued to provide specialized services for women experiencing domestic violence within cultural marriage contexts, while also conducting research, policy advocacy, and community education that had influenced legislation and practice improvements at local, national, and international levels. The International Conference on Domestic Violence and Cultural Competency that was organized annually in Priya's honor brought together researchers, practitioners, survivors, and policymakers to share knowledge and develop more effective approaches to preventing intimate partner abuse and supporting victims whose experiences were complicated by cultural factors and immigration status concerns. The academic research programs that had been funded to study domestic violence within arranged marriage contexts continued to produce valuable findings about risk factors, intervention strategies, and recovery processes, while also training new generations of professionals who were equipped with enhanced understanding of cultural competency and trauma-informed approaches to victim support and empowerment. The policy achievements that resulted from advocacy efforts inspired by Priya's experience included enhanced legal protections for immigrant domestic violence victims, improved training requirements for professionals working with diverse populations, and better funding for culturally competent support services that address the unique needs of survivors from traditional cultural backgrounds. The community education initiatives that had been developed to prevent domestic violence within arranged marriage contexts reached thousands of families through culturally appropriate programs that provided information about healthy relationship dynamics while respecting traditional values and family structures, creating sustainable changes in attitudes and behaviors that reduced risk factors for intimate partner abuse. The therapeutic innovations that emerged from treating survivors like Priya contributed to enhanced understanding of cultural trauma and its intersection with domestic violence, providing mental health professionals with specialized tools and techniques for supporting recovery, while respecting cultural identity and addressing the complex psychological impact of abuse that occurred within traditional family and community contexts. The ongoing monitoring of prevention and intervention strategies developed in response to Priya's case provided valuable data about the effectiveness of different approaches to supporting domestic violence survivors, informing continued improvements in victim services and contributing to evidence-based practices that could be replicated in other communities and cultural contexts. The legacy of Priya's experience continued through the hundreds of women who had been protected by enhanced domestic violence services, the policy changes that had improved legal protections for vulnerable populations, and the increased community awareness about intimate partner abuse that had been achieved through education and advocacy efforts that honored her survival and transformation. 15 years after Priya Nair's secret spending sparked a confrontation that revealed her new husband's dangerous patterns of control and abuse, her story continues to serve as a powerful reminder of how quickly intimate partner violence can emerge within relationships and how cultural factors can both contribute to vulnerability and complicate efforts to seek help and achieve safety from abusive partners who exploit traditional values and family expectations. The transformation of understanding about domestic violence within arranged marriage contexts that has occurred since Priya's case demonstrates both the progress that has been made in supporting vulnerable women and the ongoing challenges that remain in balancing respect for cultural traditions with contemporary recognition of individual rights and safety within intimate relationships. The victim advocacy movement that grew from Priya's experience has achieved significant policy victories and service improvements that have protected thousands of women from similar abuse, while also advancing broader understanding of how financial control and economic manipulation function as central components of intimate partner violence that can be just as devastating as physical assault. The legal precedents that were established through prosecution of Priya's case continue to influence how domestic violence cases involving cultural and immigration factors are investigated and prosecuted, ensuring that perpetrators face appropriate consequences regardless of their cultural background or their victim's immigration status or family pressure to remain in abusive relationships. The community healing and education initiatives that emerged from Priya's tragedy have created lasting changes in attitudes and behaviors within cultural communities, providing frameworks for supporting healthy relationships, while recognizing and responding to early warning signs of abusive control and manipulation that might escalate to dangerous violence. The therapeutic innovations and research findings that resulted from studying Priya's recovery have enhanced understanding of cultural trauma and its intersection with intimate partner violence, providing mental health professionals with better tools for supporting survivors whose experiences are complicated by traditional family expectations and community pressure to preserve relationships despite evidence of abuse. The international cooperation frameworks that were developed for managing the legal aspects of Priya's case continue to facilitate successful prosecution of domestic violence cases that cross jurisdictional boundaries, while also ensuring that victims receive adequate protection regardless of their location or the international scope of their abusers' harassment and intimidation efforts. The educational impact of Priya's story extends far beyond the immediate communities affected by her case, to include enhanced public awareness about the warning signs of financial abuse and psychological control within intimate relationships, providing individuals and families with knowledge and resources necessary for recognizing dangerous situations before they escalate to physical violence or life-threatening circumstances. The ongoing victim services that continue to operate in Priya's honor provide comprehensive support for domestic violence survivors, including emergency shelter services, legal advocacy, financial empowerment programs, and long-term counseling that addresses both immediate safety needs and the complex process of rebuilding autonomy and self-determination after experiencing systematic abuse and control. The prevention programs that were developed based on analysis of Priya's experience continue to reach thousands of young adults through educational initiatives that promote healthy relationship dynamics, while providing practical skills for recognizing and responding to early warning signs of abusive control and manipulation that might escalate if not addressed through appropriate intervention and support. The professional development achievements that resulted from Priya's advocacy work have influenced training standards for law enforcement officers, attorneys, judges, counselors, and victim advocates who work with domestic violence cases, ensuring that professionals have enhanced understanding of cultural competency and trauma-informed approaches that respect survivors' dignity while providing effective protection and support. The research legacy of Priya's case continues through ongoing academic studies and policy analysis that examine the intersection of cultural factors and intimate partner violence, contributing to evidence-based practices and intervention strategies that can be adapted for diverse communities while maintaining effectiveness in preventing abuse and supporting survivor recovery and empowerment. The international influence of advocacy work, inspired by Priya's experience, has contributed to enhanced cooperation between countries in addressing domestic violence cases that cross national boundaries, while also supporting the development of culturally competent victim services in communities around the world where traditional values and contemporary safety concerns must be balanced through careful and respectful intervention approaches. The community transformation that has occurred in response to Priya's case demonstrates that even the most traumatic experiences can ultimately contribute to positive social change when survivors choose to transform their pain into advocacy that protects others and advances understanding of how intimate partner violence affects individuals, families, and entire communities across cultural and economic boundaries. Her story serves as a permanent reminder that domestic violence can emerge quickly within any relationship, regardless of cultural background or economic status, and that early recognition and intervention are essential for preventing escalation while supporting victims through the complex process of achieving safety and rebuilding their lives with dignity and autonomy. The legacy of Priya Nair lives on through the countless women who have been protected by enhanced domestic violence services developed in response to her experience, the policy changes that have improved legal protections for vulnerable populations, and the increased community awareness about intimate partner abuse that continues to save lives and promote healthy relationships based on mutual respect rather than control and manipulation. The prevention and intervention strategies that continue to evolve based on lessons learned from Priya's case ensure that her suffering was not in vain, but rather contributed to meaningful improvements in how society recognizes, prevents, and responds to domestic violence, while supporting survivors through comprehensive recovery programs that honor their strength and promote their long-term well-being and success.